The markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Raine Musñgi. Catch up with us on Newsfeed Business. Asian share markets are mixed in thin trading on Thursday after the U.S. Federal Reserve signaled a pause in policy easing. With many Asian markets still closed for the Lunar New Year, Japan's Nikkei 225 is one of the sole barometers in the region, cueing off Wall Street's ups and downs all week. Nikkei was flat after overcoming some early weakness, while Australia's stock benchmark ASX rose 0.5%. The Fed's decision to leave interest rates as is on Wednesday gave little clues about further reductions in borrowing costs this year, though some analysts believe U.S. President Donald Trump would be influential to any further rate cuts.
I think that's at least some concerns on the Fed. Of course, we not understand that President Trump really want the Fed to cut rate, right? Basically, even openly talk about this. But the Fed is an independent institution. The Fed is going to not cater to the pressure from Trump. Actually, Trump policy actually may create some uncertainties. We understand that Trump is going to really restrict immigration, and this is going to make the labor market tighter, and this can increase actually inflation pressure. And Trump actually threatened to impose tariffs on multiple nations, right? And if we understand that when tariffs is there, then actually imports were going to be more expensive. This can also increase inflation pressure as well. So all of these policy uncertainties also add into the Fed's consideration to maintain the current interest rate at this level and let the data speak. But what is important is not actually the rate decision, but the outlook or the statement from the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, after the meeting in the press conference. That's the most important thing, right? Because there, the Fed chair, we're going to talk about the economic outlook and what he believe what would be likely future move or things like that. And from this information, what I can learn is that at least in the next few months, it's quite unlikely that the Fed will going to cut rate. Yeah.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump renewed his attacks on the U.S. Central Bank hours after officials left interest rates unchanged, despite his public calls for them to cut. In a social media post, he accused the Federal Reserve and its chairman, Jerome Powell, of mishandling the economy, saying they had failed to stop the problem they created with inflation. The Fed left key interest rates unchanged at its January meeting Wednesday in a range of 4.25 to 4.5%, hitting pause after a string of cuts late last year. Powell said the bank was not in a hurry to cut more, given significant uncertainty about where the economy might be headed.
The economy is strong, is strong overall, and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. Labor market conditions have cooled from their formerly overheated state and remain solid. Inflation has moved much closer to our 2% longer-run goal, though it remains somewhat elevated. In support of our goals, today the Federal Open Market Committee decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. We're going to be focusing on seeing real progress on inflation or alternatively some weakness in the labor market before we consider making adjustments.
Meanwhile, Fed Chair Jerome Powell declined to comment on President Trump's remark that he will demand lower interest rates from the central bank. Well, President Trump's nominee to run the Commerce Department, Howard Lutnick, has advised Trump to impose across-the-board tariffs country by country to restore trade reciprocity and fairness. He also said it was nonsense that tariffs cause inflation, citing low inflation in countries that have high tariffs, like China and India.
We talked about tariffs briefly, targeted or across the board. I gave you my preference toward targeted tariffs for economy. Weigh in on that.
I prefer across the board. I think when you pick one product in Mexico, they'll pick one product. You know, we pick avocados, they pick white corn, we pick tomatoes, they pick yellow corn. All you're doing is picking on farmers. which is just not going to happen. My way of thinking, and I've discussed this with the president, is country by country, macro. Let America make it more fair. We are treated horribly by the global trading environment. They all have higher tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, and subsidies. They treat us poorly. We need to be treated better. We need to be treated with respect. And we can use tariffs to create reciprocity, fairness, and respect.
You commit to the American people that prices will not go up?
I can commit that the economy of the United States of America will be much, much better. A particular product's price may go up, but all of them, this is not inflationary. The two top countries with tariffs, India and China, have the most tariffs and no inflation. It is just a nonsense that tariffs cause inflation. It is nonsense.
Thank you.
Well, after intense backlash, the White House rescinds a confusing memo that froze federal spending for grants and loans. This comes just 2 days after the directive was issued, less than a day since a federal judge ordered a pause to the plan. The Trump administration had reportedly received a flood of calls from lawmakers and state officials questioning the policy's impact on their constituents. President Trump on Wednesday defended his order to freeze certain discretionary spending.
I'm restating right now to correct any confusion that the media has purposely and somehow, for whatever reason, created Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid have not been affected by any action we're taking in any way, shape, or form. We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse. In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that? We stopped an attempt to make an illicit payment for illegal alien resettlement. We canceled $181 million in DEI training contracts. This is just for the training of people in DEI, which has been terminated and completely terminated. And we paused $1.7 billion in unauthorized payments to foreign organizations, including stopping more than $40 million that was on its way out the door to the very corrupt World Health Organization, which has not done its job and not done it properly.
The European Commission presented on Wednesday its plans to reverse industrial decline in the bloc and step up its efforts to compete with the U.S. and China in new fields such as AI and to lower energy costs and cut red tape. The competitive compact sets out the EU executive's course of legislation and initiations over the next few years in established sectors like steel and cars and new technologies, including biotech and quantum. It also includes a proposal to favor European companies in public procurement tenders and a proposal that the Commission would coordinate national policies in energy infrastructure like electricity grids and storage. Further ideas include a special legal regime for innovative companies so that they can make better use of the EU's single market and access to finance, joint purchases by the EU as a whole of critical raw materials, and creating an integrated single European market for the defense industry.
The competitiveness compass focuses on 3 pillars. The first one is closing the innovation gap. The second is a joint roadmap for decarbonization and competitiveness. And the third one is reducing our dependencies and increasing our resilience and our economic security.
The Commission is under pressure from business, the center-right European People's Party, and countries including France, not just to simplify reporting, but to delay or water down recently approved climate legislation. The European Union is staying the course on the objectives of its Green Deal, according to von der Leyen, but she added that flexibility was needed on the way forward to those goals.
We have a very clear signal from the European business sector that there is too much complexity and the duration of permitting is too long. The administrative procedures are too cumbersome. We have to cut red tape. We will deliver an unprecedented simplification effort. But on the way forward, in a very complex transition, we will have many new insights also. We have to be adaptable, capable to adapt. We have to be flexible, and we have to be pragmatic.
The bloc is also facing fresh challenges from the new U.S. administration of Donald Trump, who promises to roll back U.S. corporate rules and urge the EU to make it easier to do business. The Commission will hear further complaints on Thursday from the European auto sector over 2025 CO2 emissions targets and potential fines as it launches a strategic dialogue to ensure the sector's future. On the lighter side, Colombian flour producers express a sigh of relief after the potential tariff war with the U.S. was prevented. They are relieved that a sanction that could have disrupted their Valentine's Day exports was averted. Colombian Association of Flour Exporters reports Colombian flours are exported to over 100 countries and produced in 116 municipalities across the country. The flour production sector provides 110,000 direct jobs in Colombia, between 20 to 25,000 during the Valentine's Day season alone. Tensions escalated between the Colombian and U.S. governments after Colombia's President Gustavo Petro refused a flight of deportees from the U.S. on Sunday, arguing that the migrants had been treated poorly. Both nations threatened sanctions, but the situation was de-escalated, avoiding potential damage to the flour industry.
It is worrying, but the reality of things is that Colombia's relationship with the United States is very important to Colombia. It cannot change from one day to the next. For the United States, we are insignificant. We represent less than 1%.
On Sunday, EDS note, when tariff threats appeared, we experienced anguish and uncertainty because we didn't know what the consequences would be. Thankfully, everything was resolved calmly. Anything that creates uncertainty affects any business.
I think it's beautiful because sometimes we think it's just a flower. But that's a lie, because a flower can cheer the lives of people who are going through hard times. A flower like this one is a nice present that can brighten people's lives.
Business and economy news from around the country in a moment. Newsfeed Business will be back. Stay with us on BNC. Welcome back to Newsfeed Business. The Philippine Trade Department touted a 20% growth in foreign investors in the country in 2024 from the year before. Let's get details from Abante Radio's Andrea Salve. Andrea, go ahead.
The Department of Trade and Industry has proudly reported an increase in foreign investors entering the Philippines in 2024. According to DTI Secretary Cristina Roque, the number of foreign investors has surged by 20% compared to 2023. Secretary Roque credits the Create More Act for this growth, as its incentives have simplified the process for establishing businesses and investments in the country. This attractive business environment has drawn many foreign investors. Roque also emphasized that the DTI is closely monitoring the prices of goods to protect consumers from exploitation, particularly against substandard products that do not meet DTI regulations. This increase in foreign investments is expected to boost the economy and create new opportunities for the country. For Bilyonaryo News Channel, Andrea Salve, Abante Radio.
Thank you so much for that report, Andrea Salve. The Philippine economy continues its expansion streak, growing 5.6% last year. But that's short of the government's target range of 6 to 6.5% for the year. For more on this story, we now have Soo Jin Kim. Our correspondent Soo Jin Kim filed this report.
The Philippine economy grew 5.2% in the last quarter of 2024, slower than the 5.5% recorded in the same period in 2023. For the full year, GDP growth reached 5.6%, outpacing the 5.5% in 2023 despite persistent headwinds. The services sector remained the biggest driver of growth, contributing 4.1 percentage points to GDP expansion. Meanwhile, agriculture, forestry, and fisheries continued to contract, dragging GDP by negative 0.2 percentage points. On the income side, the gross national income rose by 6.2% in the fourth quarter. Extreme weather conditions led to a 1.8% year-on-year contraction in the agriculture, forestry, and fisheries sector in the fourth quarter of 2024. Undersecretary De Leon says infrastructure development remains a crucial driver of economic recovery and long-term growth. By the end of 2024, 7 infrastructure flagship projects have been completed, with 11 more expected to be finished in 2025. The government also aims to leverage on evolving trade dynamics to maximize opportunities with long-standing partners while pursuing new free trade agreements.
So to achieve resilient economic growth, we need to diversify our sources of growth. For inclusive quality employment, we must encourage more investments in sectors that require workers with higher level skills. To keep food inflation low and stable, we need to anticipate potential shocks. Looking ahead to 2025, we want to regain our growth momentum. We must, for instance, leverage and maximize.
Last week, the NEDA presented the Philippine Development Report to the President, and according to Undersecretary De Leon, he was satisfied with the progress, but that he says to continue their efforts to meet the development goals. Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Well, Finance Secretary Ralph Recto echoed NEDA, attributing the slowdown to typhoons, but he also touted the Philippines still having the 5th largest growing economy in the world. Meanwhile, the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, approved a $500 million loan to the Philippines. This is to enhance the country's capacity to recover and withstand natural disasters and health emergencies. The loan is part of the ADB's Disaster Resilience Improvement Program, aimed to offset the economic and social impact of disasters. Last year, the Philippines was ranked as the highest in disaster risk globally by the World Risk Report, with 60% of its land vulnerable to natural hazards. The Philippine inflation rate may breach government's target this year and in 2026 if oil prices continue to increase. This is according to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP. The BSP explains if oil prices reach $90 per barrel, inflation may accelerate to 4.1% in 2025 and 4.4% next year. But if it shoots up to $100 per barrel, inflation may average 4.5% this year and 4.7% in 2026. This is higher than the 2 to 4% inflation target of the government. The Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines may extend its Green Technology Initiative, or Green Tech program. Attorney Anne Claire Cabochan, Deputy Director General of IPO Phil, tells Bilyonaryo News Channel's Weather HQ they will extend the deadline if there's a need to accommodate more applicants. Cabochan explains there are still plenty of slots available in the programs due to fewer applicants for this year.
There is a lot of slots available for patents, for utility models, for industrial design. So for our inventors, our designers out there, please take a look at our website, and probably they would qualify for the Green Tech project.
Under the Green Tech program, applicants can have their applications prioritized and save more than 6,000 pesos in fees as it waives technology-related intellectual property charges. The project will run until November 1st. Philippine shares dip after the Philippine economy expanded to 5.6% in 2024, and U.S. Federal Reserve leaves the interest rate in the 4.25 to 4.5% range. The PSE index was down 0.7% to close at 6107, finishing the day as the second worst performer in Asia. Majority of the sectoral indices ended in the red, with holding firms falling the most at more than 2%. Decliners also outpaced advancers, 118 to 76. Total value turnover stood at almost 5 billion pesos. Majority of the day's most active stocks ended in the red, with SM Investments falling the most at more than 3%. Also on Thursday, the peso is currently trading at 58.36. That's after the Federal Reserve maintained the interest rate and expansion of the Philippine economy. And that's a wrap for today's Newsfeed Business. Thanks for making us your daily source of financial insights. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. Follow the Money is next at 4:30. See you then.